Hello and welcome to another segment of the LPE Author Chat Series. This is your host, Kimberly K. LaBoo, and I'm excited tonight because I have with me tonight a very special guest, Mr. Jahred Rice. He is a #1 Amazon best-selling author of his new release, The Truth About the Truth. And he just happens to be my amazing son. Welcome to the broadcast, Jahred.
Hi, I'm glad to be on.
Awesome. So it's funny because I've never really been nervous about interviewing any of my guests before, but for some reason I was like really nervous about our interview. I don't know why, but I guess because you're my baby, but you're not a baby anymore. So let's talk about the truth about the truth. So first I want to talk about the title of the book and the cover. Why did you choose that title? And then talk to us about what the cover represents.
Well, excuse me. I chose the title, "The Truth About the Truth," just because. Sorry, I wanted to have a title that was relatable to everybody, and so I wanted everybody to have the ability to see the title and know that it was something that they could relate to. And then the other flip side about that is that when you think about the truth, you often are wondering and curious about, well, what is the title actually speaking about? And so when you have a title like that, it's unique because it can fit everybody's individual experience. And so I wanted to have something that people could, almost copy and paste in their life, whether no matter what the case may have been, their life, their truth. And so it's really just the ability to encompass all things truth, no matter who you are, where you're from, and what you've been through. And so that was the motivation behind the title. And then the cover, I had one idea in mind with the cover, but then it just happened to pop in my head. Like God gave me the right answer, which was the cover that we have now. And what you see on the cover is me looking at myself. But on one side is a broken image of myself, a distorted image of myself. And the other version is a full and whole, clearly put together picture of myself. And I had them looking at each other because a lot of times in life, it's hard to look at yourself for what you really are. And so going with that whole aspect and statement of truth, we wanted to make sure that the title cover was a great representation of what it really was we were trying to achieve when you read this book. And that is taking a look at yourself and really diving into your truth.
Yeah, and shout out to Jeffrey Rice Jr. for the cover shoot. He took the photo, and to Mr. Navi Roberts, who actually designed the cover, and I thought it was phenomenal, and I love what it represents. So great job all the way around on that one for your vision, and then for them stepping in to help to make that vision come true. So I think that's awesome. So in this book, you exposed a lot of hard truths. First, though, you opened the book with a really funny story, which is funny to me now, but it probably wouldn't have been so funny to me back then. Yeah. But I love how you said, I can tell you the truth now, Mom, because I'm grown and it doesn't matter. Yeah. So you opened up that story called The Green Brownie is how you opened the book, and it was on the humorous side somewhat. And to our viewing audience, they can actually see the beginning of that story on Amazon and the Look Inside feature. So if you're wondering what we're talking about as far as The Green Brownie, check it out and then purchase the book while you're there. But so in this book, you shared a lot of hard truths. So why did you write about some of the most intimate details of your life? And is there a reason why you chose to do it now?
I think the first thing in terms of the why was definitely, I just felt that it was something that God led me to do. Mm-hmm. And so I had to understand that me being vulnerable about my situations and the things that I've been through, that it was ultimately going to be the ladder for somebody else to climb out of, the holes that they may find themselves in.
Mm,
And throughout my time here, I've often, have been on the other side of that. There has been many people who have shared their stories with me and helped me come out of dark places because they were brave enough to be open and honest. So just as I was going through life and living in college and living in LA of all places, you see the brokenness firsthand. You see
wow.
what people struggle with. Like you see, you know, the cry for help that there
Mm,
is. So just being around people every single day, I made it a point to always share my love and positivity. And that was like a thing that I was known for. And so now I think just putting it into a book is something that, because I can't be everywhere at once, but with the book, I'm able to use what God put in me and I'm able to share it to the masses. And it'll be a lot more effective that way too, because now it's not just an experience or just a moment in time, but it's something very tangible that people can and look at, and they can go back and refer to it when they're in tough situations. And so that was like really the why. And right now is because if we know where we're at stand in the standpoint of the world right now, it's crazy. People are longing for healing. There's a cry out for people to be whole again. There's been a new resurgence of people just wanting to dive into self health, dive into mental health, dive into the world of just being a better person. And
mm,
so this book is everything that you need to help you on that journey. This book is going to be one of those tools that you use that will pull you up
mm.
and give you all of what you're seeking.
Wow, that's incredible. So, and I believe that it's going to do exactly what you set out for it to do. So, we talked about how you opened the book with the funny story, but right after that, things got a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
Well, much deeper. In chapter 2, which is titled Doors, you shared 3 like really gripping stories. You shared your experience living in a toxic environment. You also talked about your struggle with self-esteem issues in middle school and about the home invasion that we suffered when you were about 14 years old. So you wrote, you said, most people who know me now would say I'm outgoing, goofy, outspoken, loud, animated, fearless, and always looking on the bright side or having a great attitude regarding life. These are all the things I've heard people say about me when I ask them to describe me. All these things are true, and all these things were always a part of me and who I am. But there was a time where these traits were suppressed and definitely not the way I saw myself. So, in this chapter, you've really shared quite a bit about your struggle with depression. So, without giving everything away from the chapter, I want you to talk a little bit about that and maybe what you hope readers will gain from you sharing that section of the book.
Yeah. So when I decided to write about depression, this was a little bit later on in the process of putting the book together. But I definitely felt that there was a need to talk about the topic because I feel like maybe anxiety and depression are at an all-time high than it's ever been. And me being blessed with the situations that I've had to go through, this being one of them, and I say it being blessed because I was able to come out on the other side of it better. But I knew that it was a topic that I had to talk about just because there are so many of my friends and so many people that I know who have struggled with this. And me being on that side, I understand how crippling it is and how you don't really want to talk about it, how you don't really want to try to even explain. It's like you trying to explain it makes it even worse. And
Wow.
it's just you feel like you're in this loop that never kind of ends. And so I do understand that by me sharing my story with it, then it kind of gives that glimmer of hope to the people who feel like they're stuck, and it almost throws a wrench into the plans, the plans that the enemy had for you. It throws that wrench in there, and so things don't continue to go in the same pattern. Like all of a sudden you see somebody else say that they was able to deal with it and able to excuse me, was able to come out of it, and you see that person lively, happy, healthy, joyous, it just
Yeah.
gives you the opportunity to give yourself the chance to heal, to give yourself that last fighting chance to step up. And so I had
Mhm.
to talk about that. And yeah, like I said, like I was on the other side of it, and I knew just how hard it definitely was, and just always trying to put on the front, try to, save face, because it's also a topic that a lot of people are like afraid to admit, because now it's a little bit better, but especially like back then, a few years ago, even you coming out and talking about, oh, I don't feel well, or I'm depressed, or I don't feel good about a situation, you coming out and talking about your depression, it was low-key a sign of weakness.
Wow.
Like, people would also always look at you like, what do you mean you're depressed? Like, you're young. Like, what? That doesn't make sense. But they don't know that depression, it mostly sets in young people and in older people. And because there's a lot of, and in young people especially, there's a lot of finding out who you are. You don't really know a lot at the time. You don't know who you are. You don't know really what you like. You don't know, the thing. You don't really know how to handle the situations that come with
Yeah.
growing up. And so it's real easy to slip into a dark space, into a space of uncertainty. And so I had to talk about depression and my experience with it, and how I was able to, be pulled out of it. Because if I don't, then who will? Because like I said, from experience, when you're depressed, you don't want to talk to people. You don't want to reach out.
Mhm.
It's hard to do. And so when you just have somebody who just gets it, and which is the
Yeah.
purpose of this book, is when you read it, you'll see that, somebody gets it, and then it just gives you all the courage in the world to just take that next step to, come out of it.
Yeah. Wow. I remember you saying, I think through this process when we were talking about like the home invasion, and you talked about how, and you told me that I would ask you all the time, if you were okay, and you would always tell me yes because you didn't want to talk about it. But you said in hindsight that you figured out that that probably wasn't the best way to go. Yeah.
Hmm.
So you would encourage people your age or younger not to suppress those feelings
Yes,
now?
definitely. There's At the time when you're in it, it seems like the worst move possible. But
Yeah.
when you really talk to somebody and they show you that they care, then, so the thing about depression for me personally, I know this for a lot of other people as well, but the thing about depression is the main thing that comes with it is this sense of isolation. And like, so
Mm,
what it wants to do is it wants to make you feel alone. It wants you to feel as if you have nobody to, be um encapsulated in this hole. And so when you just open yourself up, even if it's not, the entirety of what you're going through, just letting somebody know just even a little bit of it, it gives them the opportunity to be there for you. And
yeah.
so it gives you that person in your corner. So never shy away just from even just telling them I don't feel okay. Like, it can be as simple as that. It can be as
Yeah.
simple as somebody asks you and you be honest and be like, no, I'm not okay right now. I'm not feeling the best. I'm not in the best headspace. If you
Yeah.
just saying that makes all the difference. And what we fail to realize is, just like everything in life, everything is step after step. It's level to level. And healing is like that as well. You have to start somewhere. There's no way through one conversation you're going to automatically be good. But if you speak about it the first time and say, no, I'm okay, then I mean, no, I'm not okay. And then the next conversation is, yeah, I had a rough day. This happened. And then
Mhm.
the next day after that is, yeah, this day was rough and these people were like this to me. And then as time goes on, we start to get deeper and deeper. And then we start to look at those root causes for, the depression, the anxiety, the, self-image, or lack thereof. And then
Yeah.
from there, that's how you start to build on your stepping stones to healing. But it all starts with that first conversation, and it's very needed. So, if you're out there and you feel like you have no one, go to somebody who you know you can trust, or even if it's just writing in your
Yeah.
journal or whatever. Because a lot of people, and I've come to find this myself, writing in my journal was almost the equivalent as talking to somebody. Because
Mm.
the best thing about it was the journal didn't talk back. The journal didn't judge me. The journal didn't criticize me. The journal didn't
Wow.
look at me with a funny face. But I was able to still get out those emotions and still get to a place where I felt okay, where I could
Mm.
breathe. And so I just always encourage anybody who's dealing with those tough times, no matter what it is, no matter why it happened in the first place, to just speak about it.
Wow, that's so powerful. Oh, great advice. Great advice. Um, so after that, after that whole chapter where you talked about, those incidents, you gave 5 steps to turning trauma into triumph. And I just want you to talk about number 2 and number 3. So number 2 was trace your pain, and number 3 was know your triggers. So talk a little bit about those two. First, trace your pain.
Yeah. So when we're talking about turning our trauma into triumph, I thought that the most important step in this process, or one of the most important steps in this process, was tracing your pain. So what that definitely means is just being aware of where the pain came from. In order
Mm,
to heal from anything, you have to know where it starts.
wow.
Just like what a so when you're like looking at anything that you have to solve a problem, even if you're just looking at something basic like a math problem, you
Mhm.
have to know where to start. There's an order of operations, right? We've all learned this in school. And so you have to start with the simplest thing. And
Yeah.
the simplest thing is often the thing that leads you to your answer. And so in this case, our answer is healing. And
Mhm.
the math problem itself is the things and the situations and the behaviors that we don't like. And so we have to start
Mm,
with the simplest seed of what it is. And that's where trace your pain comes in, is getting you to maybe get into a time of meditation or just think in a quiet space and just really try to recollect, well, why do I feel inadequate? Why do I have so much anger built up? Why
wow.
don't I like certain people for whatever reason that I can't even pinpoint? We have to be able to be brave enough to go back and find those points of pain, because the great thing about it is, and at the time it may seem like harsh, but when you look back hindsight, it's like, wow, it really was just this one thing that tainted
Yeah.
my whole world vision. And once you fix it, the relief and the burden that's lifted off of you is so amazing. And so then that leads, once you find out what that thing is, you have to also know, which was point number 3, which is knowing your triggers.
Yeah.
And so the thing about knowing your triggers is, that you feel this pain, that there's something weighing down on you. Well, when you know your triggers, what that basically means is, I'm just figuring out what situations in my current life today, that I may be faced with, that kind of arise that feeling of inadequacy, that anger, whatever the case may be. What situations am I in that may have me going back to the place that I don't want to be in? And so
Wow.
when you identify those, because a lot of times, I'm sure you've had this, where you just talk to somebody, like it could be a coworker or a friend, just in the day, and you say something to them, and they just snap on you. It
Yeah.
had nothing to do with you. You didn't say anything crazy to them. You didn't do anything wrong to them, but they just snapped at you. And
Yeah.
so I use that example because a lot of times we snap on people, and they have nothing to do with what we're dealing with.
Yeah.
And so that's why you have to know your triggers, because if you don't know your triggers, you start going off on people who don't even deserve it. You
Wow.
start, affecting and badly influencing relationships that you actually care about, people who actually are there for you. And
Yeah.
so it's important to know. I give this scenario in my book. It's important to know, the things that set you off. And the one example that I actually gave in the book, I'm gonna spoil just a
That's
tad
okay.
little bit. But the one example that I gave was, long story short, through my trust being broken, and my space and my space being invaded and me being harmed, I always felt like people were out to harm me. And so one day, I remember the day like it was yesterday. I was walking into the 7-Eleven when I was in LA, and I went to open the door, and then there was a guy walking up right behind me. I went to open the door, and before I even had the door like halfway open, he was like right up behind me, like almost pushing me into the door. And I literally got so like angry. I got so like heated at the time. And at the time I was with my ex-girlfriend, and she saw it. Like she saw me get worked up.
Yeah.
And just I was so built up, and that stuff, that anger and everything about it just carried on for like almost the rest of that day, until she asked me, she said, "Why are you letting that one thing just be the thing that's controlling all of your energy right now?" And I
Wow.
went on to explain to her, I'm like, I don't trust people, I'm paranoid, whatever, whatever. And so she actually was very key in me looking back and understanding that it came from almost 10 years ago.
Wow.
And all of like that one reaction came from 10 years ago. Not even the fact that he was all up on me. He didn't want anything to do with me. He was just worried about, he could have been in a rush. He just wanted to go in,
Yeah.
have coffee or whatever, and be out. Maybe I was
Mm.
moving a little too slow, but it had nothing to do with him wanting to harm me. It had
Yeah.
everything to do with me feeling insecure and me being so concerned with my lack of security. And also it had something to do with me not trusting God. You
Wow.
can like look to that point. And so when I really sat down with my ex-girlfriend, with God, and we were able to look at the things that caused my trauma and caused my pain, and I was able to identify what things, again, like we were talking about, the triggers, we were able to look at that and see that was one of the situations that would let it arise. And so
Wow.
it's important to know those things, because once you know those things, then you can start to make a change.
Wow. So powerful. So powerful. Wow. That's good. So I often say I wish every parent of a teenager would buy this book, because you revealed so many things that I think are key for parents raising children, male or female, these days. So I want to ask you, what advice would you give to parents of teenagers, and especially those parents who think they know everything about their child? Because I feel like in this book, I really was introduced to the real you. And I've lived with you all your life, but there was so much that I didn't know. And I had been quote unquote deemed the helicopter mom, right? Like I felt like I was always there, but apparently I wasn't. So what advice would you have to parents raising teens, just about things to look out for, things to that may help them to help their children better in some of these situations?
Well, I think the first thing that just comes with all of it, even outside of parent to child, but just person to person, is
Mhm.
open and honest communication. When you establish that with your kid and you let them know that they're able to have an honest conversation with you, and that they're and I think the most important thing about it is getting them to understand that their actions have consequences, but their honesty shouldn't.
Ooh,
And when I say that, I just mean that no matter the situation, if they are genuinely feel safe enough to come to you, then there shouldn't be any fear of consequence. And a lot of times when you're a kid, you're scared of your parents. You're scared about what they may or may not do, what the consequences may
yeah,
be. And so that deters you, and it gets you to a point where you don't want to share. You don't want to tell them, even if it's something that hurt you. You're still
wow,
like, oh, I know my parents wouldn't have liked that I put myself in this situation, whatever. And so you kind of shy away from it. But as a parent, I think it's important to let your kids know that they can be honest with you, and let
yeah,
them know that their honesty will not warrant a consequence. And
okay,
so we also have to get to, as I'm not a parent yet, but I will be. But I know that as a parent, I want to be in a place where I can put my feelings and my ego and my emotions aside and
Mm-hmm.
try to understand and feel for my kid and understand that my kid is different than me and understand that this is a person before anything. This is a person. And because it's my child, I should be even more tender with them. I should be
Wow.
even more caring. I shouldn't ostracize my kid because of something they may have done, because we were all young before. We all have made the mistakes. And so
Yeah.
to get to a point where you're angry or legitimately, in a state where, it's okay to be frustrated, of course,
Yeah.
but don't ever get so angry that the kid feels like they can't come and talk to you. That's just the
Yeah.
most important part about it. And then on the other side, like as a kid, we have to understand that, well, hopefully that our parents want the best for us, that our
Mm-hmm.
parents were put on this earth to love and support us. Like we
Yeah.
came to them and it wasn't an accident, no matter the circumstance, it wasn't a mistake. And, God knew exactly what he was doing at every moment. So who you're with is who you're supposed to be with. And
Wow.
so having the courage to be open and honest and vulnerable, I know that that was a mistake that I made, and I wish that I was back then, because it would have saved me a lot of heartbreak. As a kid, I went through a lot of heartbreak. Like
Mm-hmm.
I remember like crying all the time, but I
Wow.
never wanted to say anything because it was just it was just something, just being a kid. You kind of just don't. It's a gap between kid and parent,
Wow.
but we have to do our best to try to minimize that gap. And like I said again, understand that we are people, and all people need a sense of belonging, community, love. And so it's important to just make sure that that is the foundation of the relationship.
Wow. Great advice. Wow, we are running out of time. So I wanted to talk about, so let's see. I was going to talk a little bit about the dream section, but let's see. You shared some of your spoken word and poetry in the book as well. That was another section. And one of the ones that really stuck with me was your poem, Kill, Steal, Destroy. So is a poem that's really exposing the trick of the enemy as it relates to lust. So why did you write about that?
Um, I wanted to write about that topic because it was probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest, I guess, obstacles that I've
Mhm.
faced. Um, because a lot of what I've went through in terms of heartbreak and just like trauma and things that scarred me, they stemmed from that place of lust. And even the situation with the home invasion and everything, it started with lust.
Yeah.
Because if I wasn't in a place of lust and I wasn't trying to, just being blunt, if I wasn't trying to have sex,
Yeah.
then I wouldn't have been in that situation in the first place. And
Mhm.
so I knew that that was also a topic that I needed to discuss, because day in and day out, I, I've thought this thought to myself so many times that, there are like three very powerful things in this world: love, fear, and lust. If you
Wow.
really think about just what, as we do as people on the daily, for the most part, we are doing what we do, and either one of those three categories is being touched in
Yeah.
what we do on a daily basis. And I understood that, especially growing up, that's all I thought about. That's all I was doing. Like everything I did was on, the side of that. Like for the most part, there was always a underlying motivation
Wow.
through everything that I did. Um, that always went back to lust. And so in that particular poem and in that piece, it was kind of it was kind of just laying the cards out on the table. It
Mhm.
was just, again, and like I said, even in it kind of goes back into that other chapter talking about turning the trauma into triumph.
Mhm.
It was that particular poem and that particular piece is the step of tracing my pain, tracing
Wow.
where that all the negative things came from. And so in that particular piece, you'll see the depth of where it came. Is tracing it all the way back to my youth, and then
Wow.
it's following it back up the grapevine. And now I'm looking at it. Well, I know all of these things now. How can I change it, and how can I move forward? But and I believe that I left that piece kind of incomplete. And in hindsight, I'm glad that I did,
Mm,
because what it does now is now you're able to insert your story into there. You're able to, the reader being that, you're able to insert your story into, the blanks. You're able to
yeah.
look your story and you see the way that the enemy tricked and planned and patterned his way into my life.
Mm,
You can go back and look at your life, and you say, well, wait, well, this does always happen. Wait, I do always make this mistake when this happens.
mm,
And oh, I see this one thing that happened led me to feel like this, and it led me to do this. And so
wow.
just that's pretty much the basis of that poem, and why I wanted to include that.
Nice.
I know it's a big thing that I struggled with, and I'm
Mm,
sure I'm not the only one.
no, definitely not. So, and then you had in chapter 8, you have a title, A Line to Heaven, where you included several prayers in the book. And so, people just gonna, y'all just have to get the book, read the book in order to get all that, because we're running out of time. But I did want to ask you, what was the writing process like for you? Was it easy, difficult, inspiring, healing? What was that like for you?
Yeah, I feel like I have probably one of the most untraditional writing processes of anybody, because the majority, maybe 75% of this book was already written when I decided to make a book in the first place.
Yeah,
So the majority of what you'll see in the book is a combination of 3 years plus of me journaling, of me putting together my thoughts and just expressing and releasing how I felt in some of my, hardest times and some of my happiest times. And
yeah,
so it was just, I understood that one day that these stories weren't just for me, that they would have to be shared. And I understood that there was a message in there. And
yeah.
so that helped a lot. But yeah, definitely a 3 year subconscious planning of it. God
Awesome.
knew what he was doing.
Yeah,
And so that's the beauty of it. But the rest of the stuff that I had to add and incorporate, which was mostly the true stories,
yeah,
and the vulnerable aspect of it, because just putting together my journal, that was vulnerable in itself, but there was a lot of stories and topics that needed to be talked about
yeah,
that weren't in the journals. And so I knew that I needed to put those in there. So me actually sitting and writing those out, and writing about my childhood trauma, writing about my depression, writing about all the different things that are in the book, it was more than healing. It was more healing than I thought. I remember
mm,
literally every time, it was usually pretty much always on a Monday. Mondays are my most productive days. But I remember sitting there writing, maybe 2 to 3 hours maybe for each section that I wrote. And I just remember every single time I was almost shaking. I was like,
wow,
just because each topic that I talked about, it brought up new pain, it brought up new trauma, stuff that
mm,
I thought I was over, stuff that I
wow,
thought that stuff couldn't affect me anymore. But I said this before to somebody, when the difference between me writing it, because a lot of people who have been around me, like, I have no problem sharing my stories and telling you face to face. But the difference between that and actually writing it was, I couldn't just, it wasn't a fleeting moment. It
mm,
wasn't something that I could just walk away from. Like,
wow,
once I wrote it on the page, it was there, and it was looking back at me. And so just to have the, just the moments of just really looking and reflecting and just sitting with it,
mm,
because like I said, it wasn't going anywhere. I
right,
wasn't backspacing, I wasn't deleting, so it wasn't going anywhere. It was sitting right there on the page, and I read it over and over again, and
mm,
to the point where I had tears writing some of it. I was, like I said, I was shaking. I was nervous as if I had a million people sitting in front of me, but it was just me and my computer. So
Yeah.
it was definitely a very interesting but powerful experience. And it was
Yeah.
definitely needed because, like I said, I thought I was good. I thought a lot of things that, I experienced, I thought I healed from completely. I thought
Yeah.
that I was good completely.
Mm.
But there's still always those little remnants of, seeds or doubt, or, still those little inklings of trauma that still are in there. And
Mm.
so you gotta go in with the hand towel. The mop isn't always gonna get everything. Sometimes,
Wow.
the mop will just put some of the water into the corner. You gotta get in there on your hands and knees and grab that towel of healing and really get all of it out. And so that's
Wow.
what writing this book was for me. And I really pray, and I know that it will, but I really pray that this is a part of that hands and knees, back-breaking work to healing, for
Yeah.
everybody else who reads it.
Nice. Nice. Wow. So I think we've talked about just about everything. So I just wanted to ask you what your overall goal is for the book and what you want it to accomplish. Like we talked a little bit about it just then, but what's the overall mission that you have for this book?
The overall mission is just to allow people to be great by knowing their truth. When I say
Yeah.
that, I just mean you have to know the ins and outs of who you are, the good, the bad, the ugly. I wanted to
Yeah.
write this book as an example of how to do that. This book is, if anything, it's a reference book. It's your play by play. It's your strategy book on how do I take what this guy did, how do I apply it to my life, and how do I become great with it. That's the overall goal and hope for this book, is just to give people the necessary tools to heal and be great and walk in their truth.
Wow. So tell everybody where they can find this amazing book, The Truth About the Truth. This is our proof copy, but it is available now for purchase. So tell people where they can find your book.
Yes, well, you can find the book on Amazon.com. It's right there. Type in my name, Jahred Rice. It'll pop right up. It's available right now. $12 for the Kindle version, 15 for the paperback.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then also follow me on Instagram at Jahred_Rice. So that's JAHRED_RICE. And all the information is all up and down my Instagram. And I also encourage anybody, if you want to talk and just have questions about anything, or you just need somebody to talk to, my DMs, my inbox is wide open. So never be afraid to hit those. I'm as open as a person can be. So I love everyone, and definitely be in touch with me. Thank you, guys.
Amen. All right. So thank you. Thank you, Jahred, for being my special guest on this evening. This was so rich and just full of good advice. And so I hope everybody will go out and buy the book. And also Jahred's website is www.jahredrice.com if you want the autograph copy. But so thank you. And thank you to our viewing audience. I know we ran over a little bit, but this was too good to cut off. So thank you for joining us this evening. And if you are thinking about writing your own book, just hop on over to www.laboopublishing.com and link up with me there. Take care and be blessed, everyone. Good night.